Man, after losing 27-16 on the road to Florida and Billy Napier, look, the writing is on the wall when it comes to Brian Kelly and what is in store for the next couple of years with him being the head coach at LSU. And that is, you're always going to be a disappointment every single season. This was the same guy who was unable to at least get you to the SEC title game with 3 first-rounders. Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., all those guys are balling out in the NFL. And yet, the most Brian Kelly could do with them is win 9 games. Most teams that have a Heisman finalist end up playing in their conference championship game. This is also the same person who at Notre Dame always made excuses for not having enough talent, for being the reason why Notre Dame consistently got dominated in big games, why they got dominated in the playoffs and in the national championship against Bama, 12 years ago? And now you see a guy who's continuing to struggle with the same issues that he had at Notre Dame, despite him having access to all the best resources at LSU. You want to know why? Because Brian Kelly is an overrated coach. LSU has the worst big-name head coach in all of college football. Brian Kelly, up to this point, during his tenure at LSU, he's 4-8 against ranked teams. Kalen DeBoer coached circles around this dude. For all the excuses that Brian Kelly made at Notre Dame for why he couldn't get them over the hump, Kalen DeBoer was able to lead Washington to a national championship appearance, only having the 34th rated roster in college football. That was one of the worst rosters to ever make it to a national championship game in the last 14 years. But you want to know how Kalen DeBoer was able to overcome not having a roster stacked with blue chips? It's because he's a great coach. He's a great strategist. He knows how to make adjustments. He knows how to get the most out of his players. Brian Kelly doesn't get the most out of his players. Do you not see how many times Brian Kelly is yelling at his kicker? He's yelling at his wide receivers. Today, he's cussing out one of his wide receivers on the sidelines just for a few drives after. Later, Kyron Lacy, arguably one of the best players on this team, ends up cussing him out on the sidelines, and he ends up having this. One thing about Brian Kelly that I do like about him is that he has some of the funniest facial expressions when you watch these LSU games. Like every time LSU gives up a big play or they end up turning the football over with Garrett Nussmeier, who I guess this dude is a quarterback cosplaying as Santa, because that's what he is when he's on the field. When you go up against Garrett Nussmeier, you know this dude is going to give you a few early Christmas presents. That's why I knew that LSU was going to be in trouble against Florida, because this is a team that beats themselves. And what does that show about you as a head coach? When your team beats themselves, you're not doing a good job of coaching up this ball club. You made all these excuses why you couldn't win that Notre Dame with less, and look at what you're doing with more. Less. Brian Kelly is never going to win a national championship at LSU. I saw my guy JD Piquel for On3 release a video reiterating his confidence in Brian Kelly, and I strongly disagree with it. There are coaches like Mike Elko, Lane Kiffin, and Kalen DeBoer who've done more with less at programs that don't have all of the greatest resources, that don't have access to all of the NIL money to buy up all the best players out of the portal and out of high school. When you can do more with less, it shows that you're a good coach. But when you're doing less with more, it shows that you're incompetent. And that's what Brian Kelly is. And what's funny is that LSU fans want him gone, but he signed the 10-year deal worth $95 million. He ain't getting fired until 2031. I didn't even know that Brian Kelly signed this lengthy of a contract. I knew that he got really well paid, but I didn't know LSU was crazy enough to give this bozo a 10-year contract. Are you kidding me? Yeah, LSU, they're stuck with Brian Kelly for the foreseeable future, and you're not going to be a bad team with Brian Kelly. You're never going to win like 5-6 games. You're not going to be like what FSU is right now under Mike Norvell with Brian Kelly, but you're going to be a consistent team that is good, but not good enough to get into the playoffs. And when the playoffs expanded from 4 to 12 teams, everybody made it seem like LSU was a virtual lock to make it into this thing. But Before the season, I said this team was overrated because I didn't trust Brian Kelly. Look at what he did at Notre Dame, made excuses for why he couldn't recruit well, why he couldn't win the big games. When you are somebody who makes constant excuses, it's one of those things that just shows that you're not willing to make adjustments. You're just saying, I need more of this, I need more of that, instead of holding yourself accountable. Why do you think his players are turning on him? Why do you think Kyron Lacey was cussing him out on the sidelines? Because he doesn't hold himself accountable. After every press conference, he always says, this loss is on us. We got to be better as coaches. And then right after proceeds to throw guys under the bus. Brian Kelly just sucks as a head coach. You were better off just keeping Ed Orgeron. Hell, at least Ed Orgeron, y'all like to say that he just got a great situation where he just walked into all these great assistant coaches. He happened to get lucky, was striking gold with Joe Burrow in the transfer portal. I mean, what about Brian Kelly? His teams weren't as good as that 2019 LSU squad, but they weren't too far off. You had 3 first-round picks last year and the Heisman Trophy winner, and the best you get out of that was 9 wins? You LSU fans got a nightmare on your hands down there in Baton Rouge for the next 5 to 6 years until you can afford to buy out the rest of Brian Kelly's contract, because all the rest of his tenure is going to be is nothing but disappointment. You're not going to be a bad team, but you're going to be nothing more but an above average, middle of the pack squad with Brian Kelly as your head coach, because there's too many good coaches in this league now compared to what there were before Brian Kelly arrived in Baton Rouge. Now you got Lane Kiffin, Kalen DeBoer, Mike Elko. All these dudes are coaching circles around Brian Kelly right now. All these dudes have the resume of doing more with less, while Brian Kelly has always been a dude that's made excuses for why he needs this, why he needs that to win. I feel bad for you LSU fans, man, but he ain't going nowhere anytime soon. He's locked in for at least a few more years with that 10-year contract y'all gave him. And it was just embarrassing for him to lose to Billy Napier in Florida as a 3.5-point favorite too? Come on, man. It sucks to be an LSU fan right now because you're stuck with this bozo as your head coach for the next couple of years, cussing out his players. He need to cuss his own self out.